Welcome to What Shall We Say to These Things?
I'm TJ,
And I'm MJ.
and this is a low-key ghetto Bible study.
Yes, and we finally starting another a book. We're not doing the whole book,
yeah.
but yeah, we're starting another, I guess,
Portion of the Bible.
Right. Yeah. Today, and yes, this is the point we ask you to pause the video and pray. And now we'll get into it.
So, I don't know about you, but like the beginning chapters of Genesis stress me out. So we've decided that we're going to start with Genesis chapter 12.
Yes.
We're starting with the story of Abraham. And we'll move forward through his and his descendants' lives going forward. So we're starting with Genesis chapter 12. And as is usual, I split it into two chunks. And so our first section is looking at verses 1 to 10. So this begins with God telling Abraham to move. He tells him, get up from your homeland. You're leaving your father's house. You're leaving all the familiar places and the familiar faces, and you're going to go to a place that I will show you. And God promises Abraham that God will make Abraham a great nation, that he will be blessed, that his name will be known, and that he will be a blessing. And that God continues, and he says that he will bless the people that bless Abraham, and he will curse those that curse him. And through Abraham, all the families of the world will be blessed. And Abraham is obedient to God, and he leaves his home country of Haran. And at the time that he leaves, he is 75 years old. And then we get an account of that we basically told Abraham doesn't leave by himself. His wife Sarai goes with him, his nephew Lot, and they take all their material possessions and all the people that they were responsible for, and they went into the land of Canaan. And we are given a brief record of some of the stops he makes. We are told that he passes through the land and he goes onto the plain of Moreh. And at this plain of Moreh, God appears unto Abraham and tells him that he will give this land to Abraham's descendants. And in response to God appearing to him, Abraham builds an altar right there to the God who appeared to him. And then we're told that he continues his journey and he goes to a mountain east of Bethel and he pitches his tent there and he builds another altar to God and he called upon God. And then he moves again and he goes further south, and as he moves further south, we're not told exactly where he settles, but we are then told that there comes a famine. And it's a very, very serious famine. And so Abraham goes to stay in Egypt. And that's the end of verse 10.
Okay. This was difficult for me because I know the story of Abraham. I know it. Our father has done a presentation on it, on Abraham's entire journey, and I'm like, oh, look at Abraham doing being faithful and following God, but having to sit down and apply it to my life, or try to put myself in Abraham's shoes. But it's possible that God knows me well enough to not ask me to do something like that. But I cannot imagine having to pick up, leave my people, leave my home, and I don't know where I'm going, and just, even with a promise like that attached to it, like that I'm going to be blessed, and anybody who curses me is going to be cursed, and I'm going to be a great nation, I'm going to be a blessing to others. Like, that sounds good, but the leaving home part, not so much.
Yeah, and I think for me it was a testament to Abraham's faith, that even without a destination, there was no end point for his journey. God is like, when you get there, I will tell you this is the place. And he moved. That was an incredible step of faith. And in my notes, I have that, and I think we've joked about this when we were talking about Ruth and not wanting to leave our parents' house, for me, even if I know where I'm going,
it's a no.
It's a no. And I think maybe I'm thinking about it in terms of
literal,
not just literal, but I feel like it's my personality coming into play as well. Processing this story is that I want to know where we're going.
Oh,
right?
Okay.
I want to know what the end destination is, and so for me, like, that's a whole another level of, one, I don't know where I'm going. Two, you asking me to leave my parents.
Listen, no.
So like that's I agree with you, and completely on that.
Yeah, but the thing is, if God spoke to our parents and asked them to move, I wouldn't have a problem.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know that it's necessarily the location.
It's leaving your parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
That's the root of the problem.
That's the problem. Yeah. But I guess I don't know if it'll change when I'm 75 years old.
Yeah.
But in a sense, Abraham left with his family.
Mm-hmm. His immediate
family. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that makes a difference, because our parents did that. They left their parents and moved multiple times, right? And like, I never had a problem with that. Mm-hmm. Well, I wouldn't have a problem with that
because you're moving as a family unit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think
in a situation where you are the parent, right? Mm-hmm. It may be a different scenario. You with your spouse, your children.
Yeah.
God tells you to move your family. It may be something different. Yeah. One of the things that I found interesting was that, like, I think a lot of the time we look for God to promise to bless us, and I think we fixated on God bless me indeed. But I think it was significant for me that God said, not only will I bless you, but I will make you a blessing to others. And I think that is that was something that we talked about a lot when we were looking at Ruth, about being a Boaz, about allowing God to use us to bless others, to impact the lives of others positively. So I was like, okay, I see that
coming through here.
It's not just that I will be good to you, but I will use you to be good to others.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful. I like that. Another thing but it's what's the word? Present throughout most of the Old Testament is thing of God speaking directly to people.
Okay.
Yeah. So Abraham just hears God, and we don't know if it was a literal voice from the sky telling him move, but he can recognize God's voice. He can know that this is a direction from God, that I need to pick up my family and move. And you see that throughout his trip, he's in conversation with God. He stops and he builds altars. And I was thinking about it. Like, very likely the altars were for sacrifices.
Okay.
And I'm thinking at that point in time, it would be a sacrifice. Being on the move, with his cattle probably would not have been the best thing for them. They would be prone to, I guess, heat stroke and taking a few out of the pack and killing them would have indeed been a major sacrifice, because they already
under stress,
yeah. And I'm sure they would be losing them regularly, well, depending on how quickly they were moving as well. But it helped me process that offerings at that point in time was really sacrifices. Yeah.
I think it was interesting that they made note of the fact that he was 75 when he moved. And I think, especially being aware of, like, the rest of his story, it's like this may be like the middle of his life, if not even the middle.
Yeah, it seems like his the beginning. Like, okay,
exactly.
This young man picks up and goes off.
And so for me, it was
to find
interesting
his fortune, kind of like.
I had to reframe myself and not think of 75 as we do now,
Okay.
because he still has so much of life left ahead of him. There's still so much of his story. But I just found it interesting that they mentioned that he was 75, and I think the other thing that I found interesting was that they mentioned that his wife went with him, his nephew went with him, that they took their material possessions, but then it also talks about the people they took with him. So it means that they took any servants or slaves that they owned went with them as well.
Yeah.
So it was really
complete
yeah.
uprooting.
Yep.
And
we're moving.
Yeah.
We're moving. There's no possibility of us coming back.
Yeah.
Everything has to go, and everybody has to go. So I thought that was interesting. And like in what you were saying, in terms of it being sacrificial, they mentioned, I don't know, it's like this may not have been everywhere he stopped, but based on how they stated, you get the impression that everywhere he settled, he built an altar.
Okay.
Yeah. So every point of settlement, there was a place of worship.
Okay.
Yeah. Which to me was significant. And my last point is that it seems like Egypt was the place of refuge during hard times.
That's interesting.
Because we see it again
for
in his descendants.
Right.
But then I was also thinking about the New Testament
and Joseph
and Mary fleeing to Egypt. So it seemed like Egypt was the place to go when you're having a hard time. Yeah.
But I'm assuming at that point in time they were doing well, because like a famine in Egypt is like, I feel okay. So maybe I don't have my history right, but if Egypt had always been how they were, they had already figured out how to get water, because they're essentially a desert. So they'd already figured out how to get water. And famines were largely associated with droughts at that point in time. So they figured out how to survive and make food in a place where there's very little water. That's if Egypt was like that then, like how it is, right?
Yeah.
So droughts would not affect them. So that makes sense.
And I think you also get the impression that they, as a territory, did not necessarily experience famine, because based on what we find, how we see them respond, several chapters down the line,
that there's going to be a famine.
Right.
Okay.
It means that famines in surrounding territories did not necessarily impact them as severely, and it might be based on what you're saying, that they had good irrigation systems, that they had themselves figured out. But it's an interesting thing to see come back again several chapters. Well, no, I guess a couple chapters down the line, because we have a good bit of the story to go. Yeah.
And my final point is that here we have another famine. It's not not chronologically, but here is a man who is following God's instructions, and a bad thing happens while he's doing that, and so it just kind of removes the idea that, just because you're doing what you're supposed to be doing doesn't mean everything is going to go well. Bad things are still going to happen, but there's going to be a way out. Essentially, he ends up going to Egypt and finds refuge.
Okay. All right, so let's look at the last half of the chapter, looking at verses 11 to 20. So as they get closer to Egypt, Abraham has a conversation with his wife. He pulls her aside and he says, "You're a beautiful woman. The Egyptians will see you and want you for themselves, and they will kill me to get you." Right? So if anybody asks, just tell them you're my sister, and so that I might live. Right? And so it happened that when they did get to Egypt, just as Abraham predicted, the Egyptian men did take notice of his wife Sarai, and so much so that she got the attention of Pharaoh's officials, and they went to Pharaoh like, "Man, you need to see this woman. You need to see this woman." And basically the end result is that Pharaoh decided that he needed to see this woman, and she was taken into Pharaoh's house. And Abraham is treated well for Sarai's sake, and he is given a load of cattle, and he's given servants, both male and female, And like it seems like things are going good. But then God brings trouble to Pharaoh's house because of Abraham's wife Sarah. And I guess God must have revealed specifically what was happening to Pharaoh, because he pulled Abraham aside and he's like,
why would you do this?
What are you doing to me? Like, why did you not tell me this was your wife? Why did you say this was your sister? And why did you allow me to take her as my wife? And then he says, like, look, your wife, go. Take your wife and go. Be gone. And Pharaoh gives his men orders regarding Abraham, and they send him off on his way with his wife and everything that he owned.
Yeah.
My first note, right, is that Abraham's an interesting person, right? Now hear me out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here he is, taking this journey, trusting God. He has no idea where he's going, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's moved by faith, trusting God to lead him. But he does not have the faith that God would spare his life if the Egyptians want his wife. Like, God has sent you on this journey, right? Not telling you where you're going, but you're moving by faith. But you think this same God who has sent you on a journey is going to let the Egyptian men kill you for your wife?
Listen, right? Why is only the Egyptian men not going to want his wife? That's what I don't understand. He's traveled from Haran all the way. He passed through Canaan. How the Canaanites didn't want his wife?
But I guess he's been settled on the outskirts all along. They've kept to themselves. But at this point, he's seeking refuge in the people's territory. I guess the Egyptians have good taste.
I'm sorry. I don't understand how it's just the Egyptians. Nobody else, unless he's been threatened before. I don't know. But yeah, it is an interesting concept that he's been trusting God to protect him right throughout from bandits and all kinds of things.
And to direct him. And then somebody's going to kill him for his wife. Yeah. I was like, bro, really? But
Yeah.
I can't judge him. Like, I can't judge him because we all have our points of weakness and areas where we can sit.
And we see him benefit from it though.
Yes.
We see him benefit from it. He's getting wealth. He's getting treated well, and like you could understand why he's like, this wasn't such a bad idea.
But like, okay, so let me give 2 points quickly back to back, right? Because one of them kind of piggies off. Well, not really, but kind of. So my first point is that, not my first point, but the next point I have is that by our standards, Sarah would have been a more mature woman. Seeing her husband is 75, let's put her into her 60s, because when we get further down the line, you get the impression that there's like a 10-year age gap between them. So this is a woman in her 60s, right? Who is still so, well, I can't say still, because we're still talking by our standards of what we think a 60-year-old would look like now, right? But this is a woman, if we estimating that this is their midlife, this is a woman in the middle of her life who is so physically attractive, like to the point where she gets the Pharaoh's attention. And we're talking about Pharaoh of Egypt, where I believe that there are like extreme beauty standards.
Okay.
Right? So I like she would have been a looker. Like where Abraham going with this baby? You know, like he's going trekking through the desert, through wherever, with a hot wife. You know, so I thought that was very interesting. Right? And I think this will be the last point that I make. I wonder, right, what Abraham's plan was. Had God not intervened and Pharaoh had decided that he was keeping his wife? Like, what was the plan? Like, what was he just gonna stay in Egypt and miss his wife? Would he have left without her? Like, what he was gonna do? Like, I was like, did he come up with a plan? Like, did he think this through?
Yeah, I don't. That could have ended badly. But I guess he's grateful that God intervened. But that was interesting to me as well, that God intervened. Because somebody had to have... How did Pharaoh find out? we say, some people are saying there's a plague, bad things are happening, and so assuming he goes to his like wise men, right? How are they going to figure out? And so the only assumption is that God revealed it to them, and that's again one of the mind-blowing things to me, that I've come to think of these places that are not Israel as these heathen like idol worshipping places, but a lot of the time they're getting communications directly from God. The pharaohs are always having dreams, and it just, I guess, changes my perspective a bit, that just because the Israelites were God's chosen people didn't mean
that they had exclusive rights
to God. Exactly. Yeah. And that's mind-blowing for me.
And I think that's a modern problem. That's a modern problem.
Yeah. And it reminded me of when we were studying Esther, and Haman's friends predicted the future, and it's just like, okay, so like God could literally use anybody.
Yeah. But like, what I was finding, like, I think you mentioned it during the week, and you're like, Abraham pimped his wife out, right? But like, what I found interesting is that he literally traded his wife for cattle, and his life, in quotes, based on what an imaginary scenario that he came up with.
Because we don't know, like, and I think that's the thing about fear and anxiety. Like, yes, this is a possibility, but like, how much of a possibility is it? Really?
What's the probability?
Yeah. He was right in the fact that his wife was beautiful and people would take notice. But like, yeah, the same God who brought plagues on Pharaoh would have protected him. Yeah.
Yep.
So that's the beginning of our study of Abraham. He's not doing too well right now.
Up and down. It's an up and down. But I think that's a very realistic depiction of humanity and our ongoing journeys with God. We do well, we move well in faith, and then like 3 stops down the line, we're not trusting him to take care of something very, very temporal. So, what are your lessons about God? What do you have?
Okay. So this one has been, I guess, mulling around in my head not for a while, but it's something I've been struggling with as well. That, like, why did God choose Abraham? Like, just a random dude where was he? In
Haran.
Right. Random dude tells him, okay, I want you to pick up and move, and then I'm going to bless you, and you're going to be a blessing. And I'm like, there must have been, this is how many years after Noah and them, there would be lots of random dudes chilling around the place. Why Abraham? And like, the answer is not my business, essentially. I don't remember where this is, but there's a text in the New Testament, I think, about God having the right to choose who he extends mercy to, who he blesses, and like a lot of this will extend into my what can I learn about I think. So I don't know if we were on to wait, but it just reminds me of God's I guess, is that the word, autonomy? His right to just do what he wants, and choose who he wants, and use who he wants, and bless who he wants. And it kind of reminds me that he's God. Yeah.
But I think it also helps that he can see the big picture. So he was able to look and see all the generations down the line and be like, this the guy. I like what his grandkids are gonna do. And I think that's English might not be my first language right now. My first point is that, like, sometimes God asks us to do things or to move in ways that require blind faith. sometimes you just have to trust him. Like there's nothing, like you just have to move and trust him. That's it.
Yeah, I've just seen it. I don't know if that was supposed to be up at the top or if it's a application. Is that maybe Abram had to leave everything he knew behind in order to become the father of many nations.
Mm-hmm.
So like maybe to become who he had to be, he had to leave.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he had to leave. And I guess there's so much we don't know and we don't see, that God does see, about our environments and about our current skill set, and sometimes moving and change are the only things that will mold us and make us into who we're supposed to be.
And I think I liked that part so much that I mentioned it in what stood out to me, but I have it in my notes as well. That God will not only bless us, but He's willing to use us to be a blessing to others. Like and I think we've talked about that a bit, like in our studies as well as in our side conversations about, and I think we talked about it in the prayer of Jabez as well, where you made the point that the material blessings have to come with the submission to God and His leading in the life. And I think with those two coming together, we get the blessing, and then we also are a blessing to others. Yeah. So it brought me back to the root Boaz, and it brought me back to Jabez, and all those stuff. My final point about God is that God is able to step in and clean up our messes.
You've been doing that from the get-go.
Yeah, but that was my takeaway, because I was saying, like, what would
Abraham have done?
Abraham have done, yeah. There's he could not have gone up against the Pharaoh, you know, so God had to step in and clean up his mess, and for me, it's a pleasant reminder that even when I mess up, like, granted, I'm not going to offer my wife or my husband, my spouse, up to some kind of leader of some kind of country. I'm not going to do that. But, like, even the little messes I make, like, he has the ability to right situations. And at the end, I can trust that he's working everything out for my good.
Wonderful. Yes, that's my last point. God knows the future. He's in control. And, like, I think that is not enough to believe. I think we also need to believe that God, like you're saying, God has our best interest. You have to pair the two, because if you don't, I think some of us think it, but we don't believe it in our hearts. Okay. But if you don't believe that God loves you and has your best interest in heart, him being in control is not going to mean anything to you. So I think the two of them have to you have to marry them. They have to go hand in hand, believing that he knows what he's doing, and what he's doing is best for you.
But I guess the second, like, he knows what he's doing is the easier one to believe, because you could believe that in good times and hard times. But when you're facing a very, very difficult situation, it's sometimes harder to truly believe that this is what's best for you, what's for your good. So, yeah. Okay, so we're on to our personal applications. What do you have to share with us?
Okay, so these are two things I struggle with. Sometimes I'm like, I don't want to have nice things. Like, and it's for two reasons that I'm afraid that I will, if there's ever a point, this is later in Abraham's story, but if there's ever a point where God asks me to give it up, or the other one is that, what if other people it makes them jealous, or they want to take it from me, right? And, like, I mean that about figurative things and literal. Yeah. So that's something that you've been helping me with as well. You know,
big sister to the rescue.
Yes, like God, it's God's right to bless me. Like he chooses how he blesses me. And this is a popular belief right now. I've been seeing a lot of it on social media. Like, what God has for you is for you. Like, nobody can change that. Nobody could take that away. What he has set for you, it's yours. And like, you really don't have to worry about anybody taking it away from you. And you also don't have to feel like you're taking it away from somebody else. Because it's yours. God has given it to you, and you there's no reason to regret. There's no reason to feel bad about it, because this is God's business.
But like, on the flip side of that, right? You just said it, and I was thinking about it. Like, so sometimes when we lose things, right, it just means that this is not what God had for us.
It's not ours.
So that way you can also think about it when you worry about people taking things from you. If that is what God allows, then this is not what He's allowed you to have. This temporary, but this is not what He has for you.
Yeah. That's it.
So my takeaway is that Abraham moving, or God calling Abraham to move, reminded me of like being much younger and our parents telling us, let's go somewhere, let's go for a drive or whatever, and not being at a point in life where we would question where we're going or what we're going to do. We just get ready and we get in the vehicle. And for me, it speaks to a childlike faith in your parents, but in this case, it needs to be a childlike faith in God, trusting that this individual is not going to deliberately try to hurt me, not going to bring me to a place that will cause me harm. They took me to school every day. But I think it took me back to that, just trusting that where my parents are going is a good place for me to go. Where my parents are taking me, rather, is a good place for me to go. And so I think as we continue our study of Abraham and I guess his descendants, I think what I willfully want to develop is that childlike faith in God, that where He's taking me, not even necessarily in an instance where He's asking me to move, but just where He's leading in my life, just where how He's allowing me to grow. He's taking me to a good place.
Yeah. And I think you, with your analogy, I think there was always, for me at least, a sense of excitement.
Okay.
And so I think I want to incorporate that as well. This idea of, my life being an adventure that God and I are going on. And we're going to hit some rough patches, but God...
Get into a couple of accidents.
God will clean up my mess, and we'll keep going, Yeah, that's beautiful.
I should have probably left this as my last point, right? My last point is that I need to be honest, no matter the circumstances I imagine. So like Abraham, I can think that, like somebody go out to do me, like your concerns about like people trying to take away your things from you and that kind of stuff. Like I come up with all kind of situations for myself, but regardless of what I imagine or what I expect or what I anticipate, I need to be honest at all times, and then save God from having to go and clean up my messes. Save God from having to go and clean up my messes. Yeah, that was my last point.
Yeah, I think I'm done as well.
I think I enjoyed studying Abraham more than I anticipated. Because it's a story we know.
Yeah.
And I think for the last two books we studied, it was about young women. It was stuff we could relate to. And Abraham is a 75-year-old man. We are neither 75-year-old man. And so I think I was approaching it a bit more tentatively, but I enjoyed chapter 12.
Yes.
And I'm looking forward to what the rest of his story and his descendants' stories have and stuff.
Yes.
So I feel like Abraham and his descendants have some very interesting life.
Yeah, those how many chapters? I think Genesis has like 50 chapters.
Mm.
We going on a roller coaster ride.
Mm. Yeah. But I'm looking forward to it. I'm anticipating that wherever God is leading us, it's going to be a good one.
Okay, so this has been What Shall We Say to These Things?
I'm TJ.
And I'm MJ. And until next time, we're out.